I just realized I submitted that a while back, and I'm going to talk about something a little bit different, so apologies about that. Here we go. So, hi, I'm James. Wonderful to be back in London. I've been in New York for the last 20 years. My favorite time being here, so thanks for having the conference in December in London. Comcast Advertising, just to contextualize it, is made up of three assets. There's a media business, which is a US-based media business, serve about 25,000 clients, both small businesses and the national holdcos across the Comcast footprint. Comcast Advertising is also accountable for looking after and stewarding Comcast's set-top box data, and doing that in privacy-compliant ways. We license it to the measurement companies to help, ideally, make cross-screen measurement better, and work, of course, with our agency partners to data enable them as well. And then finally, the technology asset within Comcast Advertising is a company called Freewheel, which many of you may know. Works with most of the programmers, broadcasters, and distributors in the US and Europe to power ad decisioning for them. One common thread that has always run through Comcast's philosophy is that it's critical that the industry works together. And in order to manage the really hard and tricky transition from a world of traditional TV to everything ultimately going IP, then we're stronger if we do it together. And none of us are big enough to do it alone to be successful. I think that's shared on both sides of the pond, and it sort of manifests itself in a number of initiatives that show the industry coming together, peers working together in spirit of solving operational complexities and also bringing standards. So in the US, good examples would be OpenAP, where all the programmers have got together and said, hey, if you, a marketer, want to buy your strategic audience in a consistent way against a single identifier, you can do that. Or the recently launched Joint Industry Council, the JIC, again, the programmers and also buy-side coming together and saying things aren't moving fast enough with solving for cross-screen measurement, so we're going to set up standards and show how first-party data can be used to do a better job there. Or another example in the US is all the distributors, the cable, the telco, the satellite companies getting together and saying addressable advertising is really, really valuable, but it's way too hard. And it's too hard, and the buyers are frustrated. The speed it takes to get a campaign live, to optimize in flight into report, and we're leaving opportunity on the table. So they have formed a group called Go Addressable, which is all in service of standardizing how things operate across different distributors. So those are three examples, and I think really important. They're all focused on dealing with simplifying operational complexity. But the other thing that matters as the worlds of traditional TV and streaming intersect and ultimately go all IP are the standards by which we all transact together. And so I want to talk about both of those today. Okay, so if any of you work in a traditional media business and you wake up every single day, you know that your job is really, really hard. And it's going to be hard for multiple years to come. We're going to be living in a hybrid world of traditional media and streaming, and the Venn diagram is overlapping, but until the full overlap happens, I expect it's going to be 7+ years till that happens. So it's just hard. That's just the nature of the job. The transitions of from to to, I think, are pretty obvious. How we're going to move to a world of, instead of reserving demos, reserving strategic audiences against deterministic first-party data, how everything is going to be dynamically served based on an impression, how the improved automation is going to take place in terms of how the buy side and the sell side execute, and how full funnel solutions will enable what has been typically seen as top-of-funnel brand marketing to be a full funnel solution that demonstrates the right incrementality to the biggest brands in the world and small businesses in terms of how it impacts all the way down that purchase funnel. Easy to say, really, really hard to do, and it's going to take a while. the complexities we all live with every single day, whether it be beneath that Venn diagram, there are different tech stacks, legacy linear tech stacks side by side with more progressive sort of IP tech stack, different policies, different procedures. Buying teams, as we know, are still not consolidated the way that ultimately they'll be. The big tech platforms have done an incredible job and should be celebrated for their ability to make it easy to buy, to get a campaign live at scale against a target audience, and then be able to get a report that spits out at the back end that says, yay, it worked. They've done a great job at doing that. The privacy landscape, as we know, is getting much tighter, whether it be with state and federal regulation in the US or everything with GDPR and other European regulation. And that is in tandem with data signals increasingly being deprecated, whether that be cookies, whether it be what's happening with browsers, et cetera. So the ability to execute advanced advertising is getting harder. And then, and I'll credit my friend from Madison and Wall, the analyst Brian Weiser, for this, the business demographic changes that are taking place, whereby as new business creation takes place, those new businesses are typically digital first, is leaning to decision making, meaning the first dollars I put in will be towards sort of digital dollars versus more traditional media. These headwinds are hard. They're manageable, for sure, because the opportunity of bringing together the best of TV, which is transparent, it has scale, it is trusted in high-quality environments with the best of digital, better automation, better attribution, data-enabled. That is going to deliver a marketing machine for the future that will provide superior effectiveness and get the credit for it. But the job is hard. Here's the problem. The problem is the job of traditional media is made infinitely harder every single day because there is not a level playing field against those competing for those video dollars. There simply isn't. The big tech digital platforms are held to lower standards than traditional media. There are transparency into a subset of impressions of where they're delivered. Third-party measurement does not happen across every single impression. It's a nice to have. And there is a hard push on both sides of the pond right now to equivalize impressions, i.e., a 2-second flip through, scrolling through a screen should have the same value as 30 seconds against a World Cup game in a big lean-back environment. They're simply not the same value. They're not. But that's the push that's happening. By the way, and if I worked for big tech, I would be pushing the same. But I don't. Traditional media is held to a higher standard. Everything is transparent. You know where your impressions are delivered. It is all third-party measured. What is the implication? The implication of this, and it is being exposed every single sort of quarter, there's something new that comes out. The last one was in the summer when ad analytics alleged that over 1,000 buyers over 3 years were paying premium dollars for YouTube inventory. And in fact, up to 80% of that delivery was taking place on Google's long-tail audience network, the Google Video Partners, and turning up in places that they didn't want the ads to turn up or they wouldn't pay for. That is highly problematic. Imagine if that happened with a TV company. Now, the rationale for lack of transparency is privacy. Can't do it, privacy concerns. Or can't tell you how the AI optimization models work, can't do that. The problem is with traditional TV, it's just accepted as different. Well, that's just the way it is. There is an imbalance in the playing field. And that is problematic, of course, for traditional media companies, but it's problematic for the marketer. It's problematic for the marketer because as decisions are made every day, the apples-to-apples comparison isn't there against value and effectiveness. The Video Advertising Board, which is made up of all the TV programmers, broadcasters, and distributors in the US, for anyone that was in Ad Week in November, did a pretty powerful presentation off the back of the alleged challenges that were exposed in the summer, and had a number of confidential conversations with the buy side. And the buy side is equally frustrated. You can read the quotes, but the frustration around the lack of transparency, the pulling of teeth to actually understand where impressions are delivered, or we just trust that the data's better, is frustrating for the buy side as well. That said, can't complain, because again, traditional TV has work to do to make it simple to buy, where big tech's done an amazing job. Traditional TV has work to do in terms of demonstrating full funnel attribution. No question. There's no question at all, and it has to do that. As humans, we naturally default to sometimes easier things, and pressing the easy button and being able to deliver at scale across big tech makes a lot of sense. But the lack of transparency doesn't. So as I said, it is true that the big media companies, Comcast, NBC, Universal as one of them, have to control our destiny and have to be accountable to ourselves for execution excellence against all the things that have to happen to manage the transition. Traditional linear TV isn't that intelligent. It needs to behave more like digital. It needs to be more addressable, more measurable, more targetable, more nimble. There is no question. You have to make those pools work together. Ultimately, when everything's delivered over IP, life becomes much easier, but that is going to take time. In a world of increased privacy regulation and increased data walled gardens, where first-party deterministic data is gold dust, the ability for a buyer and also ability for the sell side to execute across multiple data walled gardens is important. There isn't going to be a single identifier. Everyone wants there to be. My identifier is the one that everyone resolves to. But in order to identify an audience, resolve to that audience, you're going to have to work in privacy-compliant ways across multiple data owners. It is really, really messy in terms of the world of programmatic, as we know. Too many intermediaries. Ultimately, the biggest brands in the world want to connect with the supply sources that deliver effectiveness, and they want to connect that route supply and that route demand and automate the ability to do that, to make it simple, the easy button. The ad experience needs to evolve considerably. We know that. You can't just take what is a traditional ad experience and translate that into an IP streaming world. There is so much opportunity there. And then ultimately, again, full funnel campaign, proof of performance. The word performance is often associated, in fact, it's always associated, I think, with lower funnel tactics. I think there's an opportunity to redefine the word performance and think about performance in terms of true effectiveness and value. That if the traditional media world can execute on these things, there becomes a really interesting apples-to-apples comparison against lower funnel, mid-funnel tactics that are taking a lot of the credit for what top of funnel, mid-funnel is driving. But again, can't complain about it. You got to do something about it. You got to control your destiny in our world, no question. But it's also true that the ask for this level playing field shouldn't be controversial. I don't know why it's controversial. And it shouldn't be controversial because ultimately the marketer should be able to make fair comparisons in terms of where they're allocating their dollars to deliver the most effectiveness. It shouldn't be controversial. It is, but it shouldn't be. The Free Will Council for Premium Video in the US, made up of the programmers and distributors that Free Will represents, plus the VAB, again, represented by every single head of sales for the programmers and distributors in the US, came together and said, look, there's been this this fight that's gone on for years about defining what is premium. It's a battle that's gone on, and it's honestly, I think it's in the eye of the beholder. There is some quality, highly valuable content that runs on YouTube, on TikTok, on all these places, for sure, that should be coveted by marketers, no question. So you can't get into that fight. But I think it's not arguable to say that actually the definition of premium is that you are delivering impressions into content, you're doing it transparently, you know where it all runs, it's in a brand-safe environment against where you want it to be, seen by actual human beings with a high-quality viewing environment. That should not be controversial, but it is. And so this sort of Bill of Rights that we're putting out, and there'll be more to come from the VAB, is just a way to say to all of us on both sides of the industry, in spirit of doing what's right for the marketer, let's ensure that there's some consistency as the worlds of digital and traditional media converge. Sure, there's operational excellence that has to be demonstrated, no question. Sure, you've got to make it easier, you've got to prove it, no question. But it shouldn't be controversial to have a level playing field and full transparency. Here's what I think will happen, and it's hard. But if this world that I paint can be executed on, I think that multi-screen TV will get the credit that it deserves for driving incrementality down the purchase funnel. I think there will be a rebalance in where dollars are allocated between top and bottom funnel. Both matter, and the integration between the two is, I think, a huge opportunity for a marketer and the buy side. They're not separate things. They have to be integrated tactics. But you have to understand incrementality and what drives it. And that the definition of performance is going to get redefined. I'll leave you with one anecdote. I was a bad parent at the weekend. Before I submitted this, I was on the sofa with my two girls, Emerson and Annabelle, 7 and 4, watching Frozen for the 36th time. And I was lying back, and I was bad because I was on my phone, my hand underneath the sofa, just scrolling. And I was on LinkedIn, and I came across an article. I was like, oh, that's interesting. And it was from a video from Nancy King, who's the VP of marketing at Airbnb. And after I'd finished Frozen, delightful movie, I watched the video, and I just want to look at my note just to quote her. But she talked about when the pandemic hit, and Airbnb got absolutely decimated. 80% of their business went away, and there were questions, is Airbnb going to survive as a business? And what happened, as Nancy tells it, is that when the lights were turned off, it allowed them to look at advertising in a brand new way. They were freed from the shackles of being held to daily metrics and looking at the metrics and when is brand going to pay back. And the realization for Airbnb, and I quote her, is the brand is not a slide deck in the marketing department. The brand is everything. And it was incredibly powerful for me because it's obvious, but it shouldn't take something like that to demonstrate the power of what sort of multi-screen TV and brand advertising can do. But we've got to do a better job of demonstrating it, and we've got to make it easier to buy. On top of that, we need a level playing field, and we need full transparency, and I think there's a call to action for the industry to drive for that, all in spirit of doing what's right for the marketer. Thank you.